Before we get started, let me say thank you for watching. And if you're interested in the really hardcore stuff that I cannot put on YouTube without risk of losing my channel, consider becoming a Patreon supporter. You can go to patreon.com/meattrapper and get signed up. It's $5 a month, and there is a lot of material on there that you won't find anywhere else. So let's get started. Hey fellas, Meat Trapper here. Welcome to another episode in the playlist Snare School. Today I'm going to show you a variety of different ways to support your snares. The reason I'm making this video is I recently did some instruction, and I showed the gentleman that I was doing instruction with a variety of ways to hang a snare. My point was that there is no one right way to do anything. You have to look at what type of snares you're using, what your ground conditions are, what you're snaring, and what tools you have available to you at the time, and you have to determine what works best for you. So let's take a look at a variety of ways to do the same thing: hang a snare. Now, this is a very fast and very easy method to support a snare. You use a pre-made snare support. You can make these out of a wooden stake. You can make them out of fiberglass poles like I'm using here. You can make them out of metal, whatever you want. These are 3/8 inch fiberglass electric fence poles that I buy from Tractor Supply. What I do is I cut them in half so that they're 2 feet tall. I leave the little plastic foot on them. That keeps it from spinning in the ground when I try and twist it. That'll keep this pole from spinning around. And then I put a piece of number 9 wire through it, and I have 2 points of contact. One there, if that'll focus, and one there. Then the number 9 wire comes out, and that simply is inserted into your support collar. You want a nice tight fit, and that allows you to twist that collar and get that loop to hang perfectly vertical. So you end up with something that looks like that. Takes a little bit of work to make the supports, but once you've got the supports made, it's extremely fast and extremely convenient to hang your snare. Now this time I'm not using a pre-made support. What I'm doing is just carrying a coil of 14 gauge tie wire with me, and you can see I've wrapped that around that tree very tightly. That's not going anywhere, and I'm pushing on that pretty good. The next thing I do is I take my cut end, turn it under so that the animal doesn't cut himself up, and then I simply take that end and put it into the support collar, right like that. Now let me show you a little trick here. See how tight that is? And that's because I've doubled that end over, because I want a good tight fit into that vinyl tube so that there's no slipping around. Stability is critical. So when you have a small wire and a big collar, double it over and get a good tight fit. Now here's a variation on that. If you don't have a support collar on your snare, see I'm using that same wire support right there, but instead of a support collar, what I've done is I've put a triple bend and I've just wedged that cable and woven it through the bend. There's your set. Very quick, very simple. Another variation using the same tie wire, and this is how I was originally taught, right here, old school style. What you do is you make a U-shaped bend in there, and then we're going to crimp that on the snare. And so let me put the camera down. You can see I've crimped that on there, and that is going to allow me to position this snare where I want it. Here's another variation on the same type of set. We've got our 14 gauge wire, and then what we've done is we've simply wrapped it around the neck of the snare all the way to the end. That allows you to put that snare however you want. Now in this method I have a piece of number 9 wire, and I'm going to put a bend in the bottom of that wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shove that down into the ground. And if I did not have that bend, if I just had the plain end of the wire and I stick it in there, see, that's going to rotate. There's nothing holding that steady. See that? Nothing holding that in. But by putting a bend in the bottom of it, that's going to serve as my stabilizer, so that when I put that into the ground, it's going to stay put. Now at this point, I've simply got my wire stuck in the ground, and then I've got the wire inserted into the support collar. This works great if you have soft ground. If you're in frozen ground or ice, it's not going to work too good. But this is a very good way to have a nice snare support, good and solid, very minimal equipment. Alright, let's say we are in a survival situation, and we were smart enough to have bought a survival snare kit like the one that Southern Snares makes, or the one that Thompson Snares makes. And all we have is we have our snare, and we have our $350 custom-made bushcraft knife, because you know, in a survival situation, we're always going to have our expensive bushcraft knife. What I'm going to show you here is the split stick. What we do is we just take a little green twig that we've cut, and we're going to split it right down the middle. Let's see if I can get that to focus. I'm having camera problems today for some reason. But that's what we're going to do, is we're going to put a split in that stick. Let me do that and I'll show you the finished product here. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. Very simple. Cut you a twig, make sure it's green so that it has some springy left into it. Dry doesn't seem to work nearly as well. Stick it in the ground. Right next to your game trail, take your snare, wedge it in there, and there's your finished set. What if you've got an area where the animal is crawling under a pole or a log? Well, you could tie off to the side, or you can simply wrap your wire around the top bar, pass the snare through it, and suspend it like that. This also works with tape. If you don't have trapping wire, you're in a survival situation or broke down in your truck. If you have electrical tape, duct tape, gorilla tape, or anything like that, just wrap it around the top. That doesn't require much work at all, but that works. And if that were a deer trail, that's all you'd need. So what's the best way? Well, it depends, just like everything. If you've got the time and the desire to pre-make snare supports, they really do make life quick and easy. They're very convenient, very fast. You can really put in a lot of sets, but it's another thing to buy, another thing to make, and another thing to carry. If you're into a minimalist type of setup, you can just drop a coil of wire in your coat pocket and off you go. That works great if you're in an area like this that's got a lot of trees and there's game trails running right by the trees. If you're out on a plain or a prairie or someplace in the brush where you don't have a lot of trees, that's not going to work. You're going to have to do something else. If your ground is soft, you can just stick the wire, thick wire, directly in the ground. If you're in an area where the ground is frozen, that's not going to work. If you've got the ability to carry pliers and wire and tools, you can do a lot. If you're in a survival situation and all you've got is your custom-made bushcraft knife, then you need to learn the split stick method and get creative with stuff like that. So anyway, the common denominator and the big takeaway is to have your snare supported solidly. It doesn't matter what gauge wire you use. It doesn't matter what method you use. It doesn't matter that Trapper A does it this way and Trapper B does it that way. Figure out what works for you and practice with it, because in a survival situation, that's no time to say, well, I watched the videos, but I've never actually done it. So I want you to look at this footage right quick, because it's easier said than done. There's a knack to all of this stuff, and you need to get out and you need to put it in use. I've got a guy that lives in a state where he can't snare, So what does he do? He goes out to the woods, he makes his sets, he plays with them a little bit, sets them up, sets them off, then he takes them down and away he goes. But you know what? He's got the experience of actually making the set and actually supporting the snares, so that if he gets into a situation, he's got a little bit of experience under his belt rather than just watching something on YouTube. So get out there and just do it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.